Patrol. Police from every community in the Bay Area were there. The Blue Meanies, remember the Blue Meanies were there?
Yeah.
Busting heads, dragging people. It was awful. But we stood firm, and we actually got a commitment from the university to form a Department of Ethnic Studies that was sufficient flexibility to evolve into a federal college. Then the real battle began. But by that time, so many of the strike leaders were so burned out that we left and started working in the communities of Oakland and Chinatown. And so that's where a lot of us spent the next few years. But so after the 10th, 20th, 30th anniversary, I found that no one had written about the 30th strike. No one had written about the Mexican Americans at Berkeley during that time. So that's when I decided to try it. But to give substance to that story, I believe that a better story would be how a Mexican American from San Bernardino, California, born and raised in a barrio, part of the Chicano culture there, high school dropout, a gangbanger, this close to being sentenced to state prison. How did this person end up at UC Berkeley? And how did he end up to be one of the strike leaders? So that was my story. So that's how my story became a memoir. So to help the reader understand this person of me, the person the memoir is about, I decided to go back to my hometown. I interviewed my family. I interviewed old friends of my fathers who were like in their 80s already. Former gang members, and I found a history of San Bernardino, California, and the Mexican neighborhood that had never been written about. It wasn't in bookstores. It wasn't at the library. So this is all brand new. So I got all these stories by discrimination and school segregation and how the Mexicans were treated in that area. In that town, and so my story got bigger and bigger. Now it became part of history and ethnography, as Richard called it. And then I found out that my family were the first settlers of that Mexican area of San Bernardino. So now it became my family, the history of San Bernardino, the history of the Mexican barrio, and then how I got to Berkeley, the history of the Federal University for strike, and the aftermath. And so, yeah, I submitted my manuscript to a few people, and they said, no, you can't use that title, because they're going to say, who do you think you are, calling yourself the last Chicano? Who do you think you are saying these things, or writing about your experiences in this way, very politically incorrect? But I wanted the reader to, if I was going to write something, I wanted the reader to know what it was really like being a young man at Berkeley in those times. And, you know, we're all flawed characters, so I didn't want to present myself as a hero. So yeah, so I'm flawed. And that's what the book talks about. And so little by little, as I was doing my research, I found that nobody was using the term Chicano anymore. So somewhere in the years that I had left Berkeley, they're using Latino, Hispanic, and some other stuff, but they're not using Chicano. And I was still stuck with Chicano because I was born and raised as a Chicano. And I'd always been comfortable with that identity, and I didn't know what happened to it. So everybody else that was writing about Mexican Americans or Chicanos, they were using the word Latino. So that's when I said, yeah, I think this title is appropriate, but there's so few of us. Hey, I'm 69 years old, we're dying off. At least a dozen of the characters in my book have died just in the past 2 years. So yeah, so I'm an original Chicano. We're just about gone. So I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm going down. I am not going to read from my book because my copy that has all the markers, I lost it, and so I'm going to let you read the book. So I want to thank you again for the award, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you. The last Josephine, not the least, Josephine Miles Award is for Maria Espinoza for Dying Unfinished. And the presenting judge for that will be me. Maria is the author also of Dark Plums and also The Journey of a Secret Jew and other books. One of which one was it? It was the winner of the American Book Award. Longing was the winner of the American Book Award. This particular book, it's interesting that we have Lori Fox here because Lori Fox's first novel was called, I believe, a novel of my life. And it sort of walked the line between novel and memoir, and that is what Dying Unfinished does. This seems to be sort of a growing trend. One of Floyd's students is writing a novel, and she calls it a memoir with lies. I like that. Anyway, let me just read you this brief introduction to Maria, and then I'll let Maria read from her book. In its exploration of a mother's and a daughter's lives, Dying Unfinished is a study in the illogic, the deep longing, the dream quality of consciousness. The very title, Dying Unfinished, expresses a universal, existential, and very poignant fear that one may walk this earth painfully aware of one's uniqueness of consciousness and yet never fully grasp the dual brass rings of realization and expression, both of oneself and of the world one occupies as if by chance. Maria?
Thank you. Thank you, Claire, for your support, and I thank all of PEN Oakland. I'm really pleased to be here. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I'm really pleased to be here and really, really honored to get this award. And I hadn't realized I'm going to read. Oh, what am I going to read from? I mean, I've read from this book many times, but I hadn't realized I was going to read from it today for some reason. So I'd like to say a little bit about the book. I have a very difficult relationship with my mother. One of the central, who doesn't, right? Family problems, yeah. But anyway, she had an affair with my husband, which complicated things a little bit to another degree. And so, anyway, trying to make sense of all this. It took 2 novels. It's probably going to take another novel. Longing was the first novel that I tried to deal with it all, dealing from the husband's point of view as a Chilean writer and the daughter's point of view. And the mother was sort of an evil figure in that book. But then I really began thinking about it and trying to imagine how my mother must have felt and what drove her to all this. And I ended up really forgiving her from the depth of my heart, and more than forgiving her, really understanding. So that the book is, I became transformed by writing the book, but on the other hand, I really wanted her to be understood by people and not villainized, as I wanted the husband also, Antonio in the book. I wanted to really explore each of their consciousness. And originally I didn't want myself to be in the book at all, but eventually this voice kept coming out and couldn't be silenced. So it ended up being a dialogue between the mother and the daughter. And it starts with the mother's recollections of her childhood in 1910 and ends with her dying in 1980. And the fact that she had always really had a poetic gift and never used it. There's an old Kabbalistic saying, I think, that a talent is a two-edged sword. You either use it or it destroys you. So I'm going to read a very short passage, 2 passages. First is from Rosa, the daughter's point of view. When I was little, I used to sit on your lap and try to push your lips into a smile. You would gaze past me, apparently immersed in another world. I felt your sadness was my fault. In an old photo, you hold me awkwardly, as if afraid I might break. Your touch was tentative. I needed a firm grip. I needed your hands firm against my flesh. Bewildered, I reached out to you with all my force, seeking to be you in order to gain your love. And now I'm going to read a poem that my mother actually wrote, and I've credited her with it in the book. Her reaction to being a suburban housewife with a husband who was a sculptor and very immersed in his own art. Am I me? Am I a mother? The person in the office? Incidentally, your wife and lover? The fire that warms the cold, empty house that sometimes comes to life when I walk in? Oh, I am sick with the old sicknesses, torn and rocked. You come, pulling at me, little hands, big hearts. Flowers turned toward the sun. I will not be your son. I would be no one's son. I too turn toward the sun, kindled, blazing, consumed in its rays. And finally, one short passage from the daughter at her, when she's 18, and she's just discovering that there's life in New York outside of suburbia. Let's see. At 18, I was at the height of my beauty and power, yet I squandered these riches like an heiress determined to gamble away her fortune. I enjoyed venturing on the edge of safety. What saved me was the sharpness of my perceptions when I was in physical danger. At other times, I could be blind and deaf to what was going on. It took a life and death situation or drugs to shake me out of that trance. I found an office job that summer after a year in college in Manhattan, where I rented a tiny room for $6 a week. It was barely large enough to lie on the narrow bed and spread my arms out wall to wall. I spent most of my free time on the streets. My purse contained a diaphragm and a battered case, cosmetics, scraps of paper with names and phone numbers, a notebook with poems and fragments of stories, a small bottle of Courvoisier, and always a book, Chekhov, George Eliot, Blake, or Yeats, something classic to balance the scattered craziness of my life. In the evenings, I took a modern dance class, but life was so chaotic I often arrived late, exhausted, or failed to show up at all. I spent hours wandering the streets, talked to people in coffee shops, bars, subways. As if I were a spider spinning a magnetic web, I would draw out their secrets. That was a skill I learned from you, Mother. I knew so little of life, and I wanted to learn all at once. By fucking men, I believed I was getting to know something essential about human nature. If a fool persists in her folly, she will become wise. That is, if she survives. I created identities for myself, false names, false pasts. If one grew painful, I simply would slip it off as a snake sheds its skin and emerges someone else. When I was in, I'm going to skip just a bit and then end. When I was in high school, Dad sometimes drove me home at night under parkway lights that had an eerie orange glow. He'd ask what I was thinking, uneasy that he couldn't enter my mind. The anxiety in his voice and his nerves penetrated me. Mother, I took on your thoughts and feelings too. Where did you begin? Where did I end? The boundaries between us were liquid. I wasn't yet a human being in my own right, but a mixture of conflicting elements. So that's all right. Sorry, it's so dark. I just realized where the lights. You realize
realize our authors are up here suffering.